you are.
Go ahead and call to order the November 2nd, 2021 Redevelopment Commission. First item, approval of minutes from October 14th, 2021. I had a chance to review those. Questions or concerns? Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Next, we've got a couple of claims. READI Financial, $3,015.93. Barnes and Thornburg, $217.50. Jacoby and Toombs, $9,168.75. Everybody had a chance to review the claims? Any questions or concerns? Motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Next up, old business monthly financial review.
Yeah, go ahead.
I pretty much only have one quick update for you guys this afternoon before the presentation comes along later on the agenda. The only point I want to make out, like I was saying, is that on page 6, which is the monthly cash flow page, just the number that's looming in December. Basically, the way our system treats is any projects that we'd originally planned for this year of 2021, the system still wants it to see as it's completed in 21. Obviously, a lot of those aren't realistically going to happen this year, so claims are going to be more on par with what we've seen throughout the rest of the year, and then once we roll into next year, Mayor and I'll have discussions on what's going to end up in 22 versus 23 and timing of those. So that's really the only big update I wanted to give you guys as we close in on the end of the year. So.
I would just add to that, which is a lot of the capital expenditures that was in our projections were placeholders, fluid. In some instances, a lot of development activity required in order to bring it to fruition. There's about $1.9 million of potential capital outlays that we had identified at the beginning of the year that really are going to be moving over into 2022 or later. So one of the things that has just stalled us out a little bit on updating our projections is to see where we land with the READI grant proceeds. And I'll give you an update on that in a minute, but the reason I'm bringing up these projections is to let you know that as Parker was stating, based on their model, it's showing that anything that was forecasted to be spent in 2021 that hasn't been spent, based on their modeling, appears to be spent in December. It just keeps pushing out, where in fact about $1.9 million of those potential capital outlays are really 2022. As an example would be a commitment we made to Habitat for Humanity for $100,000 to help with the development of the subdivision up there. Part of the process before we can make that contribution to them is for them to finish their zoning and planning, which isn't done yet. And so because we're waiting on some entitlement process with regard to the real estate, that means that we haven't made a commitment yet. Another example would be the super overlook. Earlier this year, we made a $250,000 pledge to the Riverfront Development Committee to help capitalize the development of the super overlook. That was contingent on them finishing up their construction plans, getting Corps of Engineers permission, and doing the rest of their capital campaign, which is still ongoing. So that's why we haven't funded that yet. So there are things like that that we still have earmarked. They're still part of our development plans, but they're just going to move into a different fiscal year. And then with the with READI grant being introduced this summer, which then led us down another path of economic development planning for destination and workforce development, that has also kind of moved numbers around and caused us to really pause and give a lot of thought to what we want those plans to look like. If you have any questions on the projections, I'll be happy to answer those, but you'll get more detailed information as we kind of cycle through READI, and then if you don't have any questions, I'll go right into a READI grant update for you. Dan, okay with that? On the READI grant front, we submitted 2 plans I've talked about before. One was destination development, the other was workforce development. We are part of a 5-county RDA, Regional Development Authority. We submitted both of those plans, which included, between the 2 plans, probably about 15 or 16 individual projects downtown and on the hilltop. We went through a scoring process with the Regional Development Authority, and they selected, it was very competitive, they had 52 applications to include in their economic development plan that will go to IEDC. They selected our Destination Madison plan to incorporate in their statewide submission. When we were working with them on our Destination Madison plan, which had 8 projects in it, because it's so competitive and they were looking at infrastructure, workforce, as well as tourism, promotion of tourism across the 5-county area, we went through and started refining our Destination Madison plan to include, out of the 8 projects, the RDA submission is going to primarily include 3 or 4 of them, and then the ones that are not in the top category will be supported by the RDA. But we are now working through finalizing the RDA plan presentation. The actual plan was submitted to IEDC September the 30th, and we are meeting with the RDA on November 22nd with the intentions of they've asked us to also participate in the presentation to IEDC after Thanksgiving. So, and the plan is for the IEDC, which controls $500 million from the budget, from Governor Holcomb's budget, is to make the initial awards to the regions across the state for the initial grant application. So we're looking, again, we worked hard. I'm really proud of those 2 plans and what it created, because it is about revitalization, infrastructure, housing, workforce expansion. Great plans, creates a roadmap for us for the next 3 or 4 years. But by the end of the year, we should receive some feedback from the state with regards to how much of the award out of the $500 million will the RDA receive, and then from that, how the RDA will then award it to each applicant in their primary areas that they want to support. So a lot's going on there, and that's why this whole process throughout the course of the year has really been pretty fluid, because we are making commitments, but those commitments come with partners. Those partners have obligations for either private capital investment or development work that they have to do, and that's why things are constantly moving. And not to mention the fact that we have been in and still are in a market that's very disrupted, both on the construction side of things as well as the labor force and supply chain. So that's affected everything, but the outlook is really, really strong for 2022 and 23 and 24 with our planning. And the good news is we have great partnerships that are going to create a substantial amount of private investment the next few years across the community, and the assessed values in our TIF districts are growing, and that's going to create more revenue for us to invest as well. I'll pause there, and at the next meeting, we're featured in a video that the RDA prepared, and we'll share that with the Redevelopment Commission at the next meeting. Any questions on either the monthly financial review or the READI grant update? Okay, thank you. I'll ask Parker then to talk about the TIF annual tax impact statement.
All right, thank you all. I have the presentation. So just kind of jumping right in, the first page is a great introductory page to the presentation. So basically, this is the final reporting requirement owed by the RDC to the state of Indiana. This one today, just the topics of discussion are going to be just a financial data, budgets as far as like where the plans are at this year, what are future plans to the RDC, And finally, just a discussion on the TIF's impact. Obviously, we can see the physical items that the TIF's impact is on the community, the reconstruction, the redevelopment, the new buildings, stuff like that, but what is the actual financial impact if there is any? So jumping into the next page, we're going to take a look at the inside the RDC, specifically Madison's. Here we can see creation years and expiration years. Those that were created in 19 do not have expiration years assigned to them yet because there's no debt outstanding on them as statute depicts. Then we can see 2022 projections for the incremental assessed value that are certified by the county now. We can see really North Madison is where all the funds are coming into, but as we see growth in those other 4 areas, we'll see revenues, assessed values start to pop up there as well. So currently for 2022, Madison RDC has about 56.8 million within its generating revenue story. So now just quick overview. I always like to just keep this in here, just how TIF works. I'm sure everyone here is probably aware at this point. Just base AV, whatever currently was on the parcels before development rolls in. We TIF said parcels, building is built, incremental AV, the blue triangle there, it's what we generate all of our TIF revenues off of. And then finally, after the life of the TIF is up and it expires, that burnt orange color out there to the right, that's going to be symbolizing all of that assessed value, both base and increment, flowing back to the underlying units. A quick financial position of each of the funds. The Northwest allocation area is really the only one of point outside of the North Madison allocation area. It received its first little tranche of revenues this year. Obviously, it was just $1, but again, per state had to have its own fund, so that's why it's separated out. As far as North Madison allocation area goes, beginning year balance is actual. You will see that ties to your guys' monthly financial plan. As far as revenues, that will tie as well. Expenditures and then thus the ending year balance, those are going to differ from the plan purely because I went ahead and took the liberty of taking out some of the items that probably are not going to happen this year, the big ticket items. So again, that number is still a projection as we've not completely closed out the year yet, but that's why that number does differ from your guys' report that's in front of you. Next page is going to be current projects and future plans for the RDC. Obviously, I could make 3 or 4 pages for this page here, but just keeping it very high level, very simplistic for these ongoing projects on the left, the items that we saw happening this year, and then future plans for the RDC. Again, that list is a very brief version of the actual list that's on the actual financial plan. So now is where we kind of start getting into a little bit of the nitty-gritty, you could say, the actual TIF impact portion of this presentation. In order to move into this section, I like to present this question of what would property taxes collected look like if the city never utilized TIF from the beginning, so dating all the way back to 1995 when Madison first created its first TIF allocation area, and all current development that TIF was utilized for, that TIF helped fund, still occurred. So be that by the city's bill or another organization or commission's bill, it completely ignoring the fact that TIF incentivized any sort of redevelopment. So ignoring that fact, what would property tax collections look like today? So that's where we kind of get this quantified chart here on the next page. We see all the overlapping units for Madison's Redevelopment Commission. Simply put, that's any unit that has a taxing rate within Madison's taxing district. Moving to the right, you see in the gray boxes, we see the circuit breaker impact or the impact to those units. So again, simply kind of put, what that is if TIF revenues, we have an and/or here, we can either collect TIF revenues or we can pass this AV through to the underlying units. Those impact amounts is what they would be collecting should this AV still have happened regardless of TIF. They hand it off to them. Then we see 2021 budget and the impact as a percent of those budgets. Here we can see that there's no large percent impact of concern or anything. So walking down the rest of this page, we see the summation of the impact above of 884,000. 2021 TIF revenue collections are targeted right at 1.6 million, however. So because of TIF, because of the Redevelopment Commission, Madison has been able to collect roughly $800,000 more due to the utilization of TIF.
For just 2021.
Yeah, yes, sir. So stepping into the next page with the last page, is kind of taking a little bit more time to explain those numbers you saw on the last chart. So we kind of coined Tiff margin as the additional money that's collected for every $1 by the RDC. So how much of each dollar is the RDC responsible for generating? For Madison, it's about 47 cents. So about for every dollar in property taxes RDC receives, about half of that is due to the utilization of TIF. How is this occurred? You could say it really drills down on the point that the way revenues are calculated. TIF doesn't quite have as many constraints as the city's general fund or school's operations fund. There's no max levy growth quotient there. State only allows those units to grow their property tax levy by a certain percentage each year. TIF doesn't, they're able to work around that constraint. They don't have that burden for them, so they're able to grow property tax revenues quicker. So simply put, 1.6 million will be collected in TIF revenues this year in 2021. 793,000 would be collected due to the city's utilization of TIF, leading to 884,000 is the impact that the TIF has. That would have been shared amongst the units had TIF never been used, yet all the developments still occurred within Madison. I know that's a lot. It is every year. This is the same presentation we give, but every year it's still it's a bit of a data dump, you could say. So I'd be more than happy to answer questions now, should there be any, or down the road, if any come arise. I'd be more than happy to field them in as well. So with that note, are there any questions?
Parker, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
Not on this impact statement, but there were 2 notices sent out to
Yes.
overlapping taxing districts. Are you gonna cover that today?
So one of them was a letter inviting all underlying units to attend this meeting for this purpose here. The other one is, I assumed that the confirmatory resolution for Super AT was gonna be tonight, and that's what that one comprised of. I'll have to send out new ones this month, once we get closer to the December meeting, and then that one will be for the confirmatory signing.
So I just wanna mention, so the notice to taxpayers, here's the title of the document: Notice to taxpayers and all other persons affected of adoption and content of resolution of City Madison Redevelopment Commission, and notice of public hearing resolution. There was a date in there for remonstrances or questions or comments to be delivered by November the 1st. We did not get any comments. I just wanted to let you know.
Yep, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I'm more than happy. Obviously, it's a very short term for you guys to come up with questions if there is any. So I'd be more than happy to field in at any point throughout the year as well.
So on your last page
Yes.
there, the
Yep.
884,000,
Yep.
that's $885,000.
Uh-huh.
That's assuming that the same level of investment would have occurred inside the TIF district, correct?
Yes,
There's
that's
no
correct.
adjustment.
Yeah, it's really the big complication with when you're trying to quantify an impact is you can quantify an impact by backing into it, but it's almost a hypothetical impact. It's not a true. So exactly how you explained it there is right on point.
So is it fair to assume that if the TIF district had not existed, not only do we not get the 793,000, but that 884 would not be that high?
The 793 exactly, the 884 that's completely up in the air as far as yes, yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And I think the point that you're making about not being as constrained as a general property tax levy, DLGF essentially tells us every year, based on a formula of a rolling 6-year average, what our property tax levy can grow each year by, and that's how we budget for our annual budget through City Council, and we're not constrained by that here. Last couple of years, it's been about 4%, so we're getting more growth than that out of the TIF district.
Any other questions or comments?
All right,
Thank you, Parker.
yep, thanks guys.
The next item, City Matters, update from
Yeah, I'll just give you a couple of updates on things you've seen through here. confirming with Parker, we are scheduled though for Monday's plan commission with the order on the adopting, Super ATV project into the new plan. Okay. So if you remember at the last meeting, what we did was, approve a declaratory resolution creating a new allocation area for Super ATV. That's actually gonna go to, the project itself is gonna go to the plan commission on Monday for their approval. We still have, are working through projections on what level of additional investment and increase in revenue that investment will make for that new allocation area. So we'll circle back with you when we've got those more refined. Right now, we're working on a lot of assumptions and a lot of changing assumptions, I should say. We also approved at the last meeting a subdivision of the industrial park. We finished that up. That's going to plan commission on Monday for their final sign off. And that'll be done. We are working on a downtown parking study that Redevelopment Commission is funding. The company that we hired, HWC Engineering, was in town about a week ago. If you recall, they're doing, using drone technology for a 3-day period to really measure what our traffic patterns are in this designated area that we created. We should have some preliminary feedback from them about our parking inventory, and then what will ensue from that is a discussion about how we manage that inventory better from a policy perspective, what the demand and supply is, and potentially what additional investment needs to be made to have better parking in the downtown area, both weekday and weekend. So by mid-November, we should have some results from that study that we'll start refining and then bringing back to the Redevelopment Commission. And finally, on a good note, last week we had the groundbreaking for Crystal Beach, which finally got off to a good start in earnest, and that's approximately a $2.7 million project. $2 million of that's funded through our OCA grant, and then $700,000 funded by the Redevelopment Commission as part of the Stellar investments, and they are expected to deliver us the pool by May the 13th, so that we can be on schedule to open for the Memorial Day weekend. So it's going to be a lot of work between now and then, but if you drive by there, you'll start seeing piles and piles of material that's being, demoed out of the existing pool house and the actual underground infrastructure. But we're happy to see that project take off, and we have a lot going on. It's going to be very, very busy for the balance of the fourth quarter. Happy to stop there, answer any questions, and that's about it for today's agenda. I appreciate everybody's joining us today.
Is there anything else to come before the commission today? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you, Courtney. Next meeting, December 7th. I feel like I've been in this